Hi guys, and welcome back to Beyond the Apex. In today's episode we're going to be talking about the Austrian Grand Prix. We were back at the Red Bull Ring this weekend, well last weekend, just gone, an iconic track which thankfully is now going to be on the F1 calendar until 2030. Let's talk about last weekend. We had the sprint race format, so slightly different to what we normally see on a normal race weekend, so say. But we did actually see a battle for first. Now, as much as that's a bit of a unique thing this season in terms of Red Bull domination and Max domination throughout the whole weekend normally, we saw the Ferraris really, coming up against the Red Bull this weekend. Last weekend. I keep saying this weekend. I'm filming it as we've just had it, so it's last weekend. This was because both Ferraris pitted under the virtual safety car. Now, that meant that they could actually gain track position, and then we had a battle for first, but Max did dominate because, as we've seen throughout the whole season so far, Red Bull just have the pace. They have the pace everywhere. So they overtook the Ferraris with ease, let's say. So we had a Max win.
Hello and welcome to my section of this podcast. So as you can see, I'm not in my usual house or uni room. I'm actually in Spain at the moment in a summer camp. So this one's going to be a little bit different to normal. There is going to be some ambient noise, but I can't do it inside because the kids are inside most of the time, and they'd be coming in and out, and there'd be noise. So yeah, we're doing it out here. It's going to be a little bit short from me, mainly because I couldn't watch the race. I only could watch about 50% of the race. But it was the end, and that's when kind of most of the action was happening. So firstly, I just want to talk about the sprint. So I did watch that in its entirety, and what a sprint it was. I mean, usually I'm not a fan of the sprint format. I think it's just a little bit gimmicky, and it kind of takes the excitement away from the main race of the weekend. However, with changeable conditions, with strategy in a sprint, which I never thought I'd see before, it was fantastic. And obviously, just rattling off, so obviously Lando, shame that he couldn't hold on to his tyres in the end, obviously just out of the points, but yeah, and it was a dominant drive from Max. But yeah, what a sprint it was. Anyone who watched it can say that it was fantastic to watch. But yeah, let's go on to the main race. So Red Bull, they were dominant as always. As soon as Max got past Leclerc, and I think it was around lap 30ish, he just streamed into the lead, and there was no catching him really. So much so that he pitted at the end, got fastest lap as well, to get that 1 point away from his teammate as well, which really shows the competitiveness in Max. But yeah, it was an absolutely dominant drive, and that Red Bull was super quick in Austria, as we could see with Checo. Obviously Checo qualified, I think it was around P12ish, or did he qualify P15? I can't remember. It was he didn't get into Q3 once again. 4 races in a row he hasn't got into Q3. But Checo was able to get through the field and get up onto the podium, which, to be honest, with his current run of results, I didn't expect from him. So it was a good comeback drive, but it was a comeback drive that he should have been able to do anyway, because that Red Bull is an absolute rocket ship. But also, talking about Checo, he had a fantastic battle with Sainz. That was one of the bits that I could actually watch, and I was just enthralled. It was about a 4-5 lap battle. With close racing, hard racing, which is what I like to see. I think the FIA at the moment kind of cracking down with penalties on a little bump of the tyres is ridiculous. I love the hard racing between Checo and Sainz. I think it was fair throughout, and yeah, that's what we want to see. It was a fantastic battle. Yeah, moving on to Ferrari. Ferrari finally have pace again on the second, third and fourth place anyway. Of course, there is no match to Red Bull at the moment, but yeah, they have pace again. Leclerc showed it. He could kind of get away from that third place. He was comfortable second throughout the entire race, obviously led for a little bit, but he was a comfortable second at the end. And yeah, in quali pace as well, they were strong as well. He was only 400ths off of Max in the end, so it was a really close qualifying, and it's great to see, because hopefully towards the end of this season, with Red Bull slowing down the development on this car, Ferrari increasing it on this car, Mercedes increasing it on this car, Aston increasing it on this car. Hopefully we're going to get some tight races. Is there going to be a win from any car other than a Red Bull? We don't know, but we can hope for the best. But going from a positive to a negative, Mercedes, such poor pace this weekend. I mean, they finished 7th and 8th. Obviously, Lewis was demoted below George because of the penalties. I'll talk about track limits at the end, I think. But yeah, George was ahead of Lewis with penalties at the end, but obviously Lewis did have a much more... he did have a hand over George. But obviously Lewis battled with Lando throughout, which I'll go on to because I'm very, very happy. Obviously, I'm wearing my shirt proud today, for once. But yeah, it was very poor pace from the Mercs, and yeah, they will just want to forget that weekend, because obviously in the sprint as well, I think they qualified P18 and P15, so yeah, very, very poor weekend. Definitely want to forget, because Lewis was complaining on the radio throughout the entire race as well, and Toto kind of had to put him in his place, which is not what you want to see over team radio, but that's what we saw. Moving on to Alpine, wow, they really did look like kind of the 5th, 6th quickest car this weekend, which is not what you kind of expect from Alpine anymore. You expect them to be solidly 5th and kind of always getting in there for points, but they really weren't this weekend. McLaren definitely, with their new upgrades, had a hand over them, and obviously only minimal points. Ocon got 30 seconds of penalties at the end, which was just ludicrous. Evidently he was just doing a different layout of the circuit to everyone else, and still didn't have any pace. So yeah, shame to see Alpine kind of... Well, it's not. I'm not going to hide it. It's good to see them going down, because obviously the gap between Alpine and McLaren has reduced massively now. So is that fight on with the new upgrades? I'm hoping so, because if McLaren can somehow get a P5 in the Constructors out of the season, it'd be a result and a half, bearing in mind where we were at the start of the season. So yeah, moving on to McLaren. I've been looking forward to this bit of the podcast. Lando qualified. Lando is just... Austria is his home ground. He loves it. He loves it there. I saw a stat. He hasn't finished lower than 7th in any race he's raced at the Red Bull Ring, which is just an insane stat, bearing in mind he's always been in a midfield car. So yeah, obviously we brought the new upgrades. We brought the new upgrades with Lando's car. Obviously they will be coming to Oscar's car, and also we have upgrades for the next 2 races as well. Like, the excitement of McLaren fans right now must be incredible, because we showed so much pace. Obviously he qualified P3 in the sprint, P4 in the main race, I think, and obviously got P4 with the penalty at the end. Would have been P5, and had the pace over the Mercs, over the Astons. He was extending the gap to Alonso behind him, and yeah, it was just fantastic. And obviously I said we're closing the gap to Alpine in the points now, which is fantastic to see. I think there's only about a 15-point gap now, which, with our new upgrades, is that achievable in a couple of races? Possibly. So I'm really looking forward to see the next couple of races for McLaren. Talking about Oscar quickly, he had damage apparently, according to Zach Brown on one of his Instagram posts, which hindered his race. Obviously he was running kind of at the back for the whole thing, caught in traffic, couldn't do anything, and obviously didn't have the upgrades either. So it was a little bit disappointing, but Lando did carry this weekend, so we can take the positives. We can take the positives out this weekend. P4, come on. Moving on to Alfa Romeo. Such poor pace, like usual. I mean, it looked up for them in Canada, obviously with Bottas, but yeah, they were out of the points in both races. They were just kind of non-runners, really. Obviously, I only watched half of the race. I was trying to keep track of where everyone was, but Alfa Romeo is just another one of those ones where they're running P13, P14, and they're never shown on the main feed. I think there was one kind of battle. There was like a 5-car battle from 19th to 15th, I think, and Bottas was in there, I believe. But yeah, out of the points. And it's another one of those weekends for Alfa Romeo where they're just kind of nowhere. But it's Alfa Romeo, it's my chance to talk about Théo Pourchaire. He had an alright weekend. I'm not going to say it was disastrous, because the sprint was unbelievable, I think, if I remember correctly. Or no, it wasn't. He was out of the points in the sprint, but so was Vesti. But his start in the sprint was unbelievable. It was solely strategy that let him down. But I think he went from about P7 to P2 on the first and second laps, which got me excited, and then I had to stop watching again because obviously I'm here. But yeah, it was great to see. And obviously he got P6, I believe, in the actual race. Vesti got P3, managed to hold on in the end. But yeah, that championship, it's only 20 points still. There's still loads of races, so I'm still holding out hope that Teo can kind of shift it into gear for the second half of the season, and hopefully get back in that championship battle. But Owasa's catching him up as well, so it's going to be tight. It's going to be... I haven't supported a driver yet that's been in a championship battle, so I'm kind of starting to get nervous towards the end of the season whether Teo can actually do it. But fingers crossed he can, and he can be in that Alfa Romeo next year. Moving on to Aston Martin, who also were off the pace this weekend. In Canada, you kind of thought that they had got more pace, and they were obviously able to hold their own over Mercedes, even with their problems. But this race, they were really off the pace. Alonso couldn't keep with Lando. He was P5 in the end with the penalties. Stroll was in the points as well, I think. I think he was around the P9, P8 mark. But yeah, Alonso couldn't keep with Lando. But Stroll did do well in the sprint. He held his own over Alonso and finished above him, which was good to see because Stroll needed such a good weekend this weekend. And do you know what? 2 races in the points, kind of held his own over Alonso. I think you could say he succeeded in that. Obviously, he needs to be getting up there. He needs a podium this season. Because honestly, if Alonso and Stroll have the second quickest car, and Alonso's the only one in that team that gets a podium, that is very telling on Stroll's ability. So yeah, it was a bad weekend for Aston Martin, but I wouldn't say as bad as Mercedes, for instance. And obviously, they're in a very, very tight constructor battle with Mercedes, so they need some good weekends coming up. Moving on to Haas, points in the sprint from Hulkenberg, and it was an incredible qualifying. Obviously, he went up to P2 in the race and was running there for a couple laps, but obviously that car should not be anywhere near that, so they did drop down in the end. But yeah, points in the sprint, which is great to see. Obviously, they're going to move up. They're going to kind of create a buffer now. I think it's to AlphaTauri, because Williams might be ahead of them, or they might be ahead of Williams. So yeah, they're building that buffer just in case, for instance, Williams have a cracker of a race again. So yeah, P6 I think in the sprint it was, and he is still massively outperforming Kevin. Which, honestly, if Mick had still be in that seat and it was Mick and Kevin, they would have had 1 point this season, and it wouldn't have been looking good for them. But with Hulk, I reckon they can get in the points a couple more times this season. But yeah, only from rash results. On race pace, they really do not deserve to be there at all. Moving on to AlphaTauri, they really had no pace this weekend. Obviously, normally Yuki can pull a result out of somewhere, but he just couldn't this weekend. And Nick, again, the pressure is just piling on him. Apparently there were rumours that Helmut Marko gave him 4 races to the mid-season break, otherwise he'd be replaced by Lawson. I can just see there's a fly going onto the lens. I'm going to quickly go like that. But yeah, apparently he's given him 4 races. Christian Horner tried to kind of bat those rumours down, but I don't know whether to believe that or not. But yeah, the pressure is definitely piling on him. He needs to get in the points. Otherwise this season could be looking very, very short for him. And talking about no points, let's move on to Williams. Sargent, again, he was running about P12. He looked like he was having a solid race, and then obviously just fell back a little bit more with penalties. But he is showing improvements. This could just be a good track for him. I think he won both races in F2 last year in Austria, so it could just be a good track for him. And if that's what he does at one of his best tracks, it's not looking good for Sargent. And I really think he should be on the same pressure as Nick for keeping his seat, because he really hasn't had a good season so far. And it was a shame for Albon. Obviously, he was running in the points a lot this race, and then the penalties kind of let him down, and that car just really doesn't have the pace. But Albon is kind of putting it in positions where it shouldn't be, which is good to see, and I think that's kind of where their points are going to be this season. Obviously, he was running P7 in the sprint as well, and then strategy let him down again. But yeah, shame for Williams again, no points. Let's talk about the race as a whole. The race was fantastic, brilliant racing, tight racing, with loads of battles throughout the field. So I think everyone who watched that race could say it was a brilliant race to watch in general. Obviously there was no fight for the lead really, but then again there was battles everywhere else, so we've got to take that. Cars could follow really close as well. But the main problem that I'm seeing on social media today, I'm obviously filming this on the Monday, so the race happened yesterday. The main problem I'm seeing is that obviously track limits were such an issue. Apparently they had to look over 1,200 different possible incidents at the end of the race, and then there were 12 penalties given out to 8 different drivers, and that's just not what we want to see as F1 fans. And my main opinion on it is that we should just have gravel traps and grass on the outside of the track. Just have a curb and then go straight into a gravel trap, like they do on the outside of turn 5. Because that means that then the drivers can dictate their own track limits. Especially in IndyCar, we see it a lot where it's literally just a curb, then grass. If the driver wants to go on the grass, it will be slower, but they can take that risk. And I think they should do that in F1, because the track limits in this race really were just appalling. There were so many penalties given out. It took it out of the race. And even though Lando benefited from it, as a neutral, I'm still going to say that it wasn't good. I have just been joined by a cat. But yeah, it just wasn't nice to see, especially with 8 different drivers being penalised after the race, sometimes for 30 seconds worth of penalties. And it just doesn't make sense. It means that after a race, we've still got to wait 5 hours before we can actually see the real result. And as F1 fans, we do not want to see that. I think Abby's going to talk a little bit more about it, obviously, because that's her forte.
So, of course, I'm going to delve into the track limits and race control drama that we had in Austria. Now, wow is all I have to say for the drama that was caused in the race control room during the weekend, honestly. So, when I was actually planning for this podcast, I was going through the official documents on the FIA's website, and the PDF of track limits, I'm not even joking with you, was 5 PDF pages long. That's the amount of track times they deleted because of track limits. In total there were 83, but further on in the weekend, when they realised, later on I'm going to talk about the Aston Martin protest, but there were over 100 track limit infringements that race control had to deal with, and the stewards had to, give penalties accordingly. That's insane. I don't think we've ever seen that ever on a race weekend, or not, I haven't anyway. It was quite a feat. But I'm going to read out to you the penalties. So obviously it was the whole point is leaving the track without a justifiable reason, right? Multiple times. Which is breach of Article 33.3 of the sporting regulations. I'm trying to remember that. So we have 10-second penalties and 5-second penalties. Obviously, some drivers received 2 or 3, multiple penalties. So 1 10-second, 1 5-second. The list goes on. Anyway, I'm going to read them out. But the 10-second penalties were Sainz, Hamilton, Gasly, Albon, Ocon, and Ocon again, Sargent and De Vries. So obviously Ocon received 2 10-second penalties, and the 5-second penalties were Ocon again, so 2 5-second penalties for Ocon, De Vries and Tsunoda. So there was a whole bunch of penalties going on this weekend, which is absolutely insane. But talking about the Aston Martin protest, actually, so the whole thing with that was that they protested the provisional classification after the race, and because they said that a number of cars weren't penalised for track limit infringements when they should have been, which obviously hindered their result. So there was actually a hearing, and I'm going to show you. I'm not going to show you. I'm going to talk to you about the result of the hearing. So the protest was lodged against the provisional classification and its accuracy. So how accurate it actually was in terms of the people with the track limit infringements, and actually who was actually penalised in terms of penalties. So actually the result of the protest, so it was allowed, like they did it in time and all that. So basically the result was that the protest was upheld. I'm going to cut out all that waffling that I just did, because that was absolute nonsense. But the protest was upheld, and actually they did find that a lot of the laps that were infringing, you know, track limits weren't given to the stewards to then penalise. So that did affect the final classification. We also had 2 issues in terms of penalties. God, my phone is going off. Let's turn that away. We had 2 race control judicial issues in terms of pit stops, right? So the first one was an unsafe release from Ocon. So basically they released him when another car was coming into the pits, which meant that it was an unsafe release, which is breach of Article 34.14a. Which actually meant that he got a 5-second time penalty, I believe, which, as I've just previously said, he already got, what did he get? 2 5-second penalties from track limits anyway, and then 2 10-sec. Honestly, that can't be right, but it is right. But I don't even want to count up the time penalties that he got, because that's a lot. That's too lot. That's too lot? A lot. We also had Tsunoda as well, who it was alleged that he actually didn't take his penalty properly. Like, apparently one of the teams with the jack were touching the car during the penalty, but the FIA, the stewards, did look into the overhead camera footage and said that actually when the penalty was served, the jack person, I'm gonna say, moved slightly more, which actually led them to believe that actually he wasn't touching the car in the first place. So they let him off with the benefit of the doubt in that scenario. So he didn't receive a penalty for that. One really interesting race control moment that actually I saw when I was watching the race was that race control black and white flagged Hulkenberg during lap 21, but he was DNF'd, like he wasn't on the track. So that was a bit of a weird moment, and I think a lot of people picked this up on TikTok and things like that. I've seen it everywhere, but I think that was quite a funny race control antic moment, I guess, because he wasn't racing. But anyway, the race control probably had a lot going on then, so we'll let them off.
Ignoring the track limits, it was a fantastic race. Sorry it's been a little bit shorter and a little bit more sped up as always. I've just been able to find an hour where I'm not doing anything, and I'm straight back working again after this. But yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll take it to Abby for the outro. So yeah, goodbye.
And with that, I'm going to round up this episode of the podcast, the Austrian Grand Prix. Personally, not one of my favourites, but I do really like the track. Obviously, I was there last year for the Formula 1. I said that very quickly. Formula 1. So it is a special track to me. Do come back for next week, because we've got Silverstone, the British Grand Prix. So much to talk about, because obviously home race. So yeah, thanks for watching. Stay tuned, and I will see you in the next episode.
I'd also just like to say at the end of this video, obviously over the weekend we had the death of Delano at Spa, and obviously both me and Abby give our best wishes to the family. Motorsport is dangerous, and these deaths are always a reminder of the kind of safety aspect of the sport.
As Sam rightly said, it does put it into perspective that the sport is dangerous. Motorsport is dangerous. Don't forget, a lot of the tracks nowadays are quite old, and they just don't have the infrastructure to deal with the level of pace and speed that we're witnessing at most racetracks.
And the FIA always will have to improve, and we're seeing this with Silverstone this weekend, that the FIA is taking measures to try and improve rain racing as well. So obviously best wishes to the family, and rest in peace Delano.